Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast. We cover the very interesting intersection of video games and somehow modern politics. My name is Nick Craig. You can give me a follow on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig, or check out my website, or our website, I should say, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as always, can't do this thing alone. It's a pretty scary world. Brian with an I, Aldridge. Hey, Brian, what's going on, my man?
And not too much. If you want to find me at Boys Computer on Twitter or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, or Truth Social. So,
yeah.
Quite the day. We were talking a little bit about in the pre-show about that submarine, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
so,
man.
For people that are following that in the news, next week it'll be interesting to see what actually happened, because we're right in the middle of it.
Next week,
some of the situations
a day and a half from now.
Well, I know, but by next show we'll be either saying, "Wow, that was amazing, they saved them," or it'll be, "Oh, that's too bad." Or they may have no idea where they're at.
They may never find them.
Assuming they're, yeah. I mean, they could be there. Well, I mean, eventually they may find it. It's like shipwreck
eventually
down at the bottom of the ocean. The thing, it's so deep down that the thing is not going to break apart. I mean, it's the Titanic is still down at that depth.
Yeah,
it's sitting there. They're in a very secure metal machine. They'll be preserved in there,
unless they got punctured.
Unless something broken, yeah, and then it popped. But you would think. I don't know.
They would surface.
I guess you would think something would come up, but maybe things would be so small that it's going to take them a while to find it. So we'll see. Kind of like the Malaysian airliner that disappeared.
Well, was it CNN that said at the time that this is a UFO activity? I believe that's what they claimed, that it just disappeared into a black. Don Lemon
something came
disappeared into a black hole. Yeah, what an idiot.
Yeah, they were coming up with all kinds of crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, if CNN and MSNBC can't explain it, it must be aliens.
It must be aliens, absolutely. All right, speaking of aliens, Brian, AI, it's kind of like an alien. Artificial intelligence, unidentified flying objects, foreign entities. It's kind of similar. We got some stuff going on in the old AI world this week, yeah?
Well, okay, first thing that you'll notice, of course, there's AI that's being developed, and cool things I think they're going to come out of AI that are really big. But some of the things that I think you'll notice right away that maybe will impact some of our favorite blogging sites is they're starting to fire writers and instead churn out hundreds of articles using AI. Using an AI.
What's the difference?
What they are doing, exactly. I mean, maybe a little less bias.
Yeah,
in there.
Maybe actually more news. I mean, what a crazy idea.
More news. It'll be like, oh, people actually want to hear about this. Let's talk about that, rather than us hearing about some random opinion of some blog writer from Seattle. So what they're ending up doing now, these are sites that you've heard of, .esports, Destructoid.
Oh wow!
Companies like this, they are culling at least 50 humans, and which is about 40% of their workforce. And instead, they're hiring on an AI editor. So really, what you're doing is you're in charge of monitoring what the AI is kicking out and kind of maybe proofreading it. Editing some things here and there that maybe didn't come out right, but you're doing AI content and SEO strategist is what the new editors are. They're not writers. They are just in charge of making sure that the AI content gets churned out properly. So what they're looking to do is 250 articles per week using something like this. However many they need to kick out, but they can kick out as many as you want as long as you have somebody who has the ability to proofread them. I'm sure at some point they'll be like, "Oh, these are so good, we don't even need to proofread them," and they'll start kicking them out. Who knows what we'll get.
This is interesting, though. It says, assuming a 5-day work week, there's a lot to ask of one person to do with up to 50 articles per day. Here's the issue with not even AI generated content, because for years now, and it started with aggregate websites like Y Combinator and some of these other things. There is, I guess you kind of call it like a bell curve, where you're not publishing enough content, but then you hit a point where it's not a bell curve, excuse me. It's just a straight line. You're publishing too much content. Nobody is going to read 50 articles a day from a specific, even major publications like, Fox News and CNN, they might put out about that, but that's on a gazillion. I mean, they cover everything from the economy to sports to space travel to news, right? It's a very wide gambit. On a gaming website like .esports or Destructoid, 50 articles a day to me seems like content overload. Nobody's going to read any. You're going to dilute the readership so much. Brian, you're not going to sit down and read. You're not going to read 50 articles a day. That's insane.
Well,
right?
Okay, but let's think of where they're going. I think that this is going to more of the clickbait type of articles and things that they're trying to get. They're not expecting a person to really sit there and go through their site and read all their content. What they're hoping to do is to share this stuff out, get random topics that people will click on. You get enough people to kind of randomly click on one article just because whatever it happens to fall in with whatever the news of the day is, because that's really all they're doing. What are the hot topics of today? They ask if they can get an AI that actually is looking at maybe Twitter or wherever it's determining what the hot topics of the day are, and then coming up with, well, here's the things that I think would get the most clicks today. Because that's really the goal, isn't it? Because it's all about getting people to your page to put ads on it so that you can make money. It has nothing to do with actually disseminating information or getting people to be entertained. It comes down to getting someone to click on the link, to show up on your page, to render the ads. Once they've rendered the ads, do they care what you do at that point? I think they're past the point of caring whether or not you click and then go to another article and then go to another article. I think what they really want is just random one-offs of people coming and clicking some link of some random article that happens to get disseminated somewhere else. And then there you go. Because they're saying here that the person is pretty much going to be writing the title and then adding images to the article. That's what the human does. The rest of it's going to be done by AI. But is that really that much different than what these guys are doing now? If you go read, we've read plenty of the content on air of some of these guys and the type of things that they're writing, and they're just not interested.
Look at BuzzFeed.
Or they're putting in so much. Look, it's just random.
That's what BuzzFeed is. That's what they've always been for a decade.
All clickbait.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just where they're going. They're going for this, to where, okay, let's get a really interesting title. Let's get some images in here, and let's just click junk that people, once they click it, they'll be like, oh, yeah, okay. They've rendered the ads. What do they care? That's all they need. Maybe they'll get a few clicks out of them too. I don't know. It's just it's the way things are going, but I think we've seen this coming for quite a while, because just look at the quality of most of the content writers for Kotaku and PC Gamer and even Massively OP now.
So what I see here, and this is this hits somewhat close to home. I work in it's no secret. I work in the news business. I'm a newsman, Brian.
Yes.
I cover news. I mean, it's mostly opinion, but I cover news. I read news, and these sites that take this path, they will be relegated to one section. Yeah. But there is always going to be a want and an urge and I do it now with what I do on the political news side. There's always this urge to find good content. And the reality is the AI is not going to be generating what I would consider good content. It's just going to be generating mass content. Now, if you're a site like BuzzFeed or Huffington Post or some of these other sites, that's fine. You can just churn this garbage out and you'll have the same people that look at all the articles or whatever. But to me, you're going to see two different. I think you're going to see like kind of a split here, where you have the sites that go with the AI thing, and then the sites that might only have, let's say, 5 or 10 people, but those 5 or 10 people are really, really good at what they do. And there's even sites like that now on the political side. You've got sites like the Washington Free Beacon, the Washington Examiner, and things like Breitbart. Now, Breitbart's pretty big, but just these sites that write in, New York Post is a great example of a website that writes just really interesting stories. So these sites might immediately get some traction because it's just mass content. But I think long term, it's just speeding up the inevitable, which is these sites just won't cease to exist because this content is not going to be compelling. It's going to be the same garbage churned out on all of them. The cream will rise to the top and all the garbage will just fail, which is going to happen anyway. That's just the reality. So maybe this just speeds it up 5 years.
And I think that the better option for this would be why don't you come up with a way to integrate AI that assists writers? because that's really what they're starting to do. I mean, we have Google Docs here. We kind of have that ability now. I have that thing where I demoed it a couple weeks ago where I can have it, I can give it a phrase just like ChatGPT, and it'll put something in there. Have something that enhances what the article, because the problem is right now the writers that are at a lot of these places just put in nonsense, totally biased. So you're already driving away half of the people that read it in the first place. Here, it's just going to be the problem of, oh, sure, there's a lot of accurate information, but can it write it in an interesting enough way that makes it to where you don't feel like you're reading a computer generated thing? I don't know that that's going to happen. One of my clients, well, for the company I work for, one client that I help deal with is a news site for a state. It's for one of the states here in America. It's a really popular local news site. And they're sitting there and writing articles and taking the time. But the problem is the people go to that site because of what they write, because of the opinion. The AI is not going to be opinion unless you write it in to have opinion. It's going to give you the opinion of content that it's scraped, but you're not going to be able to control and have a consistent opinion doing that. It's going to be an opinion based off of random things that it's put into its system to, as its knowledge base, which is kind of like humans. But this, you can fire a human and be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to hire another one that maybe has a better perspective or is more interesting. What are you going to do with the AI? I mean, it's as interesting as it's going to get for the most part, because I bet you they're using some boilerplate system like ChatGPT, and they don't have they're not going to hire, if they're only paying $40,000 a year for this AI writer, they're not going to be writing a nice AI system to help them come up with really cool content. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
so it's definitely going to change things.
It will, but I think it just prolongs the inevitable. I mean, you can make the same argument about
it's a dying
same argument.
Place.
Look at the first automatic telephone switches, where no longer were there people sitting in head offices literally connecting calls, patching calls. It doesn't exist. It was then they created a fork system that would do it, and then you had touch tone dialing, and now it's just all PBX software based. It just speeds up the inevitable. Now, eventually you get, and the inevitable of this, Brian, is it goes to the call of oh crap, I can't remember the acronym, but it's the UBI, Universal Basic Income, where there's no jobs, everything is run by a robot, everybody needs to make $1 million a year, and the UBI, nobody has to actually have a job, and that I think that's the inevitable push on all of this stuff, is that there's no jobs available, and to some extent that's true, but again that has happened.
There's always going to be something to replace it.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think it's important to I talk about this all the time on my radio show. Context. You can look at anything in history. It always shook things up and changed things. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the iPhone didn't exist. And thinking about what that did. So it's just important to put this stuff in context. Now I do agree, you eventually get to a point where it's like, well, damn, we really don't need anybody to do this. But to me, that's still incredibly far away, and there will always be a need. But on these sites that are just turning out garbage anyway, I mean, what's the difference? You can either pay somebody $70,000 a year to turn out garbage, or buy an $1,100 subscription to ChatGPT and let it do it. So I don't see the difference. The problem is these people aren't providing, most cases, it's hard to paint with a broad brush, but these people don't provide good content. Like I think about it at my job. I'll go back to make it all about me. It's going to be hard to replace an opinion host with AI. That's going to be very tough to do, because they're paying me essentially for my, when you break it down, boil it down, they're paying me for my opinion. I mean, that's realistically what it is. Anybody can read an article, but it's the opinion that is the unique side of it. And that's what's really hard to do. But when you're not actually putting your useful opinion in anything and you're just churning out garbage, I mean, to me, it seems like the natural progression. You're not providing anything unique. Yeah. So
exactly, and they've put themselves in this situation by the way that they've been writing. I mean, just all of the writers that have been pushing content to places like these for the past 5-10 years. I think the quality and the non-bias version of what that used to be has gone away, because we can't even find any kind of a gaming news site now that doesn't have some kind of crazy bias thrown in there. But and if for anything for AI, what I would hope for is maybe it would be a way to get a little less bias, and not that they're going to let that happen, but a little bit less bias news. I think then that would be possibly relevant. Or is there going to be at some point when people no longer go and read individual news articles, but they subscribe to their top favorite sources, and then they have AI go scan all of the different articles and give them a synopsis of the day? Like, is there going to be a point where people don't even read the articles anymore?
Well,
And then it's going to kill their clickbait ads. I mean, the AI is not going to click them.
Home assistants like A Word and G Home already do that. I mean, they'll give you a news synopsis or a rundown.
But you can't really
now.
customize it. That's what I'm saying. Is it maybe some point you'll say, "Here's my favorite sites. Give me a rundown of pretty much what's on there today."
Amazon A Word has done that for years. You set the sources you want for your. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's called.
I got rid of mine a long time ago. I didn't want to. I
don't ever use it, but you pick your top couple of news sources or whatever, and you say like, hey, you can make it part of like a morning routine, and it'll tell you the weather and all this other stuff, and then it'll get top story at source, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, whatever it might be. So it's interesting to say the least.
Well, let's talk about how, because there's been issues. First of all, AI, we've talked about this before, is pulling content from all kinds of places. It's going to be the same thing, whether it's with copywritten content, whether it's a news source that's doing this. And when a person would read an article and then maybe give an opinion on it, that wasn't so bad, because they're not going to remember and repeat the thing word for word. They're going to be giving their own rendition of it. When you give it to a computer, it can try to not seem like it's copying it, but it's using copyrighted material to then reproduce and create something based off of it, which is not supposed to happen. Now, most countries haven't really dealt with this, but Japan has declared that AI training data is fair game, and they are not going to enforce copyright. So people, this is with images, with text. I can understand the thought, because sure, you want to have a really robust API or AI, but what about the people that are creating this, whether it's images, text, the people that are writing this? Once there's no more money, because, as we talked about in the last article, once there's no more money, who's going to come up with the original content that these things are based off of? Are you going to have AI now training AI, which takes all the human out of it? I think that's going to be a big problem. Or the risk is, if you narrow down so much where they can get content from, you have a very limited perspective or amount of data to kind of regurgitate or form data from. So I don't know how they're going to deal with this. This is how Japan's dealing with it, which is kind of the China way, where we don't worry about copyright, we don't worry about patent infringement, just make stuff because we want to have the enhancements from that. But here, you're taking away from someone else to be able to create something. You're de-incentivizing the original content, which eventually will go away. And then what's your AI going to be based on?
Well, then you get into
that's my concern.
The Skynet, where it is literally AI, more intelligent AI training less intelligent
feeding other AI, yeah. And then what are you going to have in the end? I mean, it's going to kind of create a circle, but I don't know
loop. Like
how
holding a
internationally
microphone up
how's
to a
this going to
speaker.
work. Yeah, and it'll get caught to where it's like in a circle logic loop. It's like this is true, so therefore this is true. Well, you determined both truths, so what, does that mean it's actually true? You're saying both are true because you think it's true. Here, is this going to be something that if let's say a company in Japan produces something that's using AI that they want to sell throughout the rest of the world, is the rest of the world going to then say we're not going to allow people to use AI resources from Japan because of copyright infringement? Because that's a big deal here in America. It's not a big deal in Russia. It's not a big deal in China and other places, but here, that's part of the way that we incentivize people creating and doing things. So I don't know. I think there's downsides. I think it's good for AI, but I think it's bad for society and bad for actual content. And it's only going to hurt content creators even more, unless you come up with a way to incentivize them or somehow give them money from this. But I don't see a way to do that. There's too much content.
I'll go back to it.
It's skimming.
I'll go back to it. There is an urge, there is a need, there is a want for good content, and yes, eventually AI or whatever will be able to generate that kind of content, but it's not. I don't think it's even close to there right now. I really don't. It can do little qualmy things, and it can do some. For example, I read a story this week in my industry. The first AI-powered DJ is on the air at some radio station. I don't remember where it is, upstate New York or something like that. And it's a lady who they've sampled, and she works in another market, and she is now on an afternoons on AI. But what is that? What does that entail? It's reading a liner into a song and stuff. I mean, it's very, to me, it's very rudimentary.
Just come up with 100
stuff.
variations of that, right? And then you have
that's kind of what it is.
What the person does now, so I think there will be places that do pick up like that, but I think there's going to be certain situations where they're going to have to learn AI. There are many limitations to AI currently. Maybe in 10 years, 15 years, that's going to be something to where it's not considered as risky. But right now, you get very mixed results from AI. Things that sometimes, if they're trying to be creative enough, it's not even accurate. How is something that's feeding off of supposedly factual information coming up with non-factual information? It's because they're trying to make it seem human-like. Well, when they implement human-like, it becomes inaccurate at that point. So, this here they're talking about training with pictures, text, everything. I think if you can give away through maybe data feeds, things that are over the air, like just train AI on things that it legally has access to, and I think eventually you will get enough context. Or like with the original, we were talking about the writers. Have people that are, if you have enough people that maybe that are feeding the AI and doing things, but you can't get down to where AI is purely doing it all by itself, because it's not going to work. And right now, I think 10, 15 years, you might have cool AI that is predictable. But
sure.
Right now, I just think it's too unpredictable because it's too early.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
I found an opinion piece. Now, this is Market Watch, and they were talking about how AI gives big business the power to bust labor unions, and this is something we've been talking about for a while. The testers for video game companies. I said this early on when they started trying to use them to create unions. You're trying to create a union in a place that is prime for AI to take over. Unions are something that if they need bargaining power, they need to feel like without us, you're going to be dead in the water. Kind of like when maybe the airlines, all the flyers strike, or in some sort of Amazon, all of the delivery drivers strike. That creates a big problem because those things right now can't be replaced by AI. But you want to talk about certain testing things and certain low-level jobs, those ones are perfect for being replaced, just like the writers that we talked about. Perfect for being replaced by AI in some areas. But, for that bargaining power of the average human who's saying, hey, I'm important, you need me. When AI is able to take your job, do they really need you at that point? If they can get it pretty close and it does it in a fraction of the time and it's about 90% there, because humans are only about 90% accurate anyways, it seems, or less.
Well,
maybe.
I get paid to be 100% accurate 100% of the time. But I mean, I agree with you, right? Most people.
You understand? But
of course, yes.
When people are involved, there's plenty of inaccuracy,
sure.
Which we look at the AI and say, well, we expect you to be 100% accurate. Well, that's not even how it is with humans. So I think as people get used to it, they'll start to realize where the inaccuracies are, and those will kind of get programmed out as well over time. And then you'll be able to start replacing humans. It is barely happening right now, but I think at this point there will be a whole fields that will be wiped out because of AI. Even programming, I think, is going to drastically change with AI.
See, you keep saying something, and I disagree. I don't think any fields are going to be wiped out. I think you're going to see a shifting of those fields. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to get wiped out. I think it's just like, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, the telephone operators that you brought up.
Yeah,
that version of it has been wiped out. The patch person has been wiped out. It's been replaced by something totally different.
Sure. Yeah. Now, when I think something wiped out, I think an industry just gone. But the
No,
telephone
I'm not
still
saying
exists.
it's good, but the employable, the where people are doing things in that industry, I think are going to be gone. The thing will still be doing it, but it'll be doing it with minimal human interaction. Places will be churning out games with just a couple people overseeing and tweaking and tuning and pushing it. I think you'll get to a point where AI is doing a lot of things, and there's just the managers.
Get to a point, yes. I think we are so incredibly far from that, though, that who knows what comes.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is, this story in Japan, there's ongoing talks of legislation in the United States. I mean, the U.S. government's very likely to come in and just completely muck this whole thing up because, these guys can't even, these guys are asking the CEO of Facebook why Google result is showing up the way that it is. That's how incompetent they are. I mean, they could do some real damage to this industry, because they're being essentially fear-mongered. I mean, you watch and read some media posts, mainstream media posts about some of this stuff, Brian, and you think the whole freaking world's coming to an end.
Yeah, it's true. Well, so there was a radio host in Georgia. I don't know if you've heard of him, Mark Walters. He is suing. He's suing OpenAI because OpenAI accused him of a crime that he didn't commit. Kind of like when we were looking at your profile, and I don't know if that was afterwards.
It was after
a broadcast,
show.
but it was talking about talking about you, and it would kind of intermix some other people with the same name and say, well, here's stuff about Nick Craig. This said this about Mark Walters, where it said that he was being sued for embezzlement and things like that. And a reporter found this, and I guess wrote it into some sort of an article. So he's suing ChatGPT, or he's suing OpenAI. Another one, a politician, Brian Hood, he sued ChatGPT in April because of something that incorrectly claimed he did, a crime. Mark Walters accused him of embezzling more than $5 million from a nonprofit called Second Amendment Foundation. And that's an accusation that's never been made. Where'd it come up with this? That's the dangers of AI. I mean, humans do the same thing, but how you can hold them accountable. This being them suing OpenAI, that'll be an interesting case because who do you hold accountable? You're holding a computer accountable, a company accountable. It's very different.
And see, that's it right there is the accountability. If I come out and make a slanderous claim about you, Brian, or somebody else, and it is completely false, I am held or could potentially be held criminally responsible, and I have to deal with the ramifications and the repercussions of that. And that's going to be the question for these AI companies is who is responsible? And at a certain point, I don't know, it seems like you almost bring this back to kind of a Section 230 argument, which, these big tech companies claim now, like, oh, Section 230, it doesn't matter what we do. Well, we're not the ones publishing this content. We're just serving it to you. It's not our, these companies can't operate under that same umbrella. That's
exactly.
A huge
That's what
problem.
I was going to say.
It's a massive problem.
Because
somebody has to be held
because
responsible.
They're creating the content. They're creating the content. OpenAI is creating the content.
Yeah.
They're using other people's sources, unlike Reddit, where someone is going onto the service and writing something. And so, sure, Reddit's not being held accountable for the random person who goes onto their service and writes something. But they're programming the technology that is gleaning pieces of information and generating that. They're not that. Someone else isn't coming in and bringing that information, or an article isn't coming in that it's then directly quoting. They're generating this content based off of that knowledge base, and that's where I don't think they, as you said, I don't think they qualify for Section 230 because who are you going to blame? With Section 230, you can always go back and find somebody to blame. It's the original person that came onto the service, and you could say, well, they're not supposed to do that. Let's kick them off. Here, who are you going to kick off? It's the AI that's actually doing this based off of information. Maybe there'll be regulations on enforcing and making sure what the data is factual. But how in the world today are you going to do that? Have you seen the news media and news and anything that we consider facts nowadays? I just don't think you can do that with something like this. It's always going to be prone to these errors because the information coming in is going to have issues in it. And if it's coming up with new content that it's not being fed 100%, it's going to come up with random stuff like this as well. And so I think it is going to be a thing that they're going to have to figure out. But you said it. The lawmakers are so inept at some points and so incompetent where they're asking how the internet works. Okay, well, the fact that you're asking me that question with no engineering understanding in the first place, you're not actually asking me how the internet works with protocols and everything else. You're just asking me, well, when I plug this cord into my wall and stuff comes to me, how's that happen? That's what you're asking me. That's the level of their question. And so the problem is you then got to deliver them an answer that they're then making a legal decision based off with zero understanding of the topic. And so I don't know how this is going to be dealt with in the government section unless, just like the internet bodies, if they come up with some sort of oversight. But it's got to be people in the industry. It's got to be people that have oversight themselves, because the lawmakers can't do it. Nancy Pelosi couldn't do it. Whoever it is, all these random people in government have no clue how all this AI stuff works for the most part. I mean, there'd be maybe a few people who have an understanding, but 90-something% I don't think would.
No, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely.
So now, okay, so ChatGPT, the boss there has called for a new government agency. Well, pretty much what I just said, to keep AI companies in check. That's a dangerous thing because look at how sometimes, depending on who's president, you get a big swing in what's acceptable and not acceptable. Look at the things that are acceptable now. You got government coming in and was telling Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you can't talk about some things that are factual information.
Yeah.
Well, because you don't like the facts. Okay, that's not my problem. Well, if you're then doing that same thing with the AI, you're then saying, well, I don't want you to learn from this information. Then you create bias because of your oversight. It has to be totally open to where you're feeding it, whether you like what it says or not. If it's considered to be truthful, you still need to feed the information into the AI, because otherwise it doesn't have the information it needs to give you a balanced and unbiased opinion. If you only give it one opinion, it gives you what it thinks is a balanced and non-opinion, but you've only given it one thing to base its opinion off of, so it is an opinion.
So Sam Altman, he's the OpenAI CEO, and this is the quote from the article. He says, yes, here we go. He told senators that OpenAI, so the organization itself, is working on a copyright system that would pay artists if their work was used to generate new art, saying that artists deserve more control. But again, they're creating their own copyright system, and I put that in air quotes because that's not really what it is. But who's going to be doing the enforcement? Right. See, that's the issue with this, is you're going to create a new, wow, Brian, look at this. Surprise, surprise. A new government agency full of a bunch of bureaucrats to look over this stuff. Who's going to provide oversight on this stuff?
And I think that they need to come at this a little bit differently. I think what they really should do is incentivize creators to submit content. If you have, it can be something you've created and sold,
What was the site what was the art website that was auto, I think you know what I'm talking about. By default, the art was automatically being tagged as could be used in AI, and then you could click it off. I don't remember what site that was.
Not DeviantArt.
No, definitely wasn't DeviantArt. It was one of those websites, and they did attempt to do that.
I know which one you're talking about.
And there was this mass backlash of, oh my God, I can't believe that our content would be used in some sort of AI, and this is the most terrible, awful, miserable thing that's ever happened, or whatever stupid garbage.
ArtStation? That was ArtStation.
ArtStation. That's exactly what it was.
Yep.
So, they've already offered that, but I believe there's a couple things here. There's an incredible amount.
That's so the problem there is AI art is getting mixed in with non-AI art. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our artists can submit their work to be indexed to where they could possibly get a little bit of the equivalent
they did do
of
that. That was ArtStation.
Well, but the problem is, don't let people see it. Don't put it out in the public for people to see, which is what ArtStation does. Make it to where people who have copyrighted material, things that they've created that they don't want the public just to have, but they don't mind if art is maybe created in the same feeling of it, which is what AI would do. do that to where then you could submit your art and get a little extra income from some piece of art that you've already created, and they're not going to be in copyright infringement because the person would have signed the right over for them to use it. They don't own it, but they can use it to train their things. And then if it gets used, if it's part of the index, then they get a little bit of money here and there. And if they put enough content in and it's popular enough, they can eventually get some decent money from it over time because of enough people using the service.
Well, you look at things like Bandcamp. More of the indie side of things. Now it's not going to be, big bucks at least right off the bat, but it potentially could be long term. I don't know, man. There's so much that's going to change between now and whatever inevitable we go towards. Yeah. It's kind of a crazy situation.
Well, and this is where, I don't know how much more you want to go into this, but that, of course, they're worried about nuclear war. And the problem with AI is not necessarily that, but I'm more worried about it pushing people, because look at what CNN and these very biased news sources, they can get people worked up. And if you were able to create something that a huge portion of the world is basing content on, and you can put that bias in there, you could get people worked up. If you could influence inside this company, you could have it to where, just like the news media pushes BLM and pushes all these things and gets people worked up over things that don't even really exist, it seems, over sometimes. Yeah. Coming up into a political season. Don't you think they'll be doing the same thing with this, to where they'll be pushing it so that they can influence people and influence things? That's my worry, is not necessarily that it's going to push us to nuclear war, but you're going to have, just like you had the riots and everything else, they'd be able to easily generate and create those dynamically based on how they tweak their content or put bias in their content. Just like all across the country, you've seen that clip where the news stations are sitting there and repeating, kind of continuing the sentence. There's one article that all of those news stations all repeat.
Yeah, it was Sinclair.
And it's kind of like, this is what brainwashing looks like, right? Then they talk about that. Yeah, you're gonna have the exact same thing with this, but done where it's less obvious, because people are thinking they're pulling data from this, totally unbiased source, and they can easily push opinion one way or the other, just like the news sources do. That's my worry. That's more of, I think that's just like you saw the Antifa and BLM and all these things, that a lot of it was fake news or things that were blown out of proportion that pushed people to think that was okay. I'm worried that they'll be able to program it in much easier and be able to push people to whatever opinion they want to have, because people are very predictable. Well, if you feed them certain pieces of information, they tend to come out with certain results.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the human brain.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm worried about, is they'll be able to train people.
Oh, yes. No question about that at all. Let's transition over to a story that we've been following for quite some time now, and it surrounds Microsoft and Activision Blizzard and that massive, nearly $69 billion merger/acquisition. And we've seen and talked about some of the issues with the UK regulatory body, seemingly every other antitrust government acquisition body across the world, something like 30 some odd countries that have these organizations, have already greenlit it. And Brian, to my surprise, and I do genuinely mean this when I say it, to my surprise, the Federal Trade Commission in the United States, the FTC, apparently will try and block this acquisition. Why do I say I'm shocked? Microsoft has so much lobbying power in the federal government. I thought that this would have been, they could have actually greased the skids on this one, seemingly. The amount of lobbying and pressure that they could have put. But the Federal Trade Commission is set to file an injunction seeking to block Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. By filing an injunction, the FTC is seeking to stop the transaction from going through before the deadline, which I didn't even realize it was this soon. It's less than a month from now, July 18th.
Just short of a month.
The FTC has apparently sued to block the $68.7 billion acquisition choosing to bring the case before its internal administrative law judge. Though that trial-like process, the judge would make an internal decision that could be appealed to the full Federal Trade Commission for a vote. So Microsoft President Brad Smith said, hey, quote, we welcome the opportunity to present our case in a federal court. We believe accelerating the legal process in the U.S. will ultimately bring more choice and competition to the market, which is exactly what you would expect there. But very interesting to see that it could, one of the holdups, and this would be a huge one for them. They can't go through this merger acquisition. They can't go through this deal without the FTC's approval. That's just not possible.
Yeah.
At least from my vantage point.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was kind of surprised. It seems like they're just they probably figured that they might not be able to come up with a decision before July 18th.
Oh,
so
God,
they're almost doing the stall technique, which is kind of dishonest in my opinion. It's not going to have time to actually be truly debated and put before a court. So you're doing something to stall it so that your opinion is forced on everybody, which I don't think is right. Because they're not allowing, they waited so long to do this that they're now just trying to stall it before the end, which I don't think is a good way to do it. I think if you do it, prove that whatever you're claiming that this is going to cause, whether it's going to be, as the UK said, this is going to be unfair for streaming services, yet we don't really know anything about streaming services, and there's no real streaming services even being used in mass production right now. But, we don't want that to start up too good. Let's make sure crappy companies start this first so that they can come in and then do it better. I mean, that's really what they're saying. I was pretty surprised, and I wish if they had an issue with it, put it to court so that you knew the decision would be done before the deadline, where if the judge felt that you were wrong, the answer would have come through and you would have been called out. But they're maybe because they know that might not happen. Because they could delay it until this deadline easy in court.
Well, let me stop you there because there is an update on this that just came out.
Okay,
so there was a temporary the FTC filed a temporary block on this deal.
The injunction,
the last couple of days, injunction, correct. Microsoft has had an opportunity to make their case. A hearing is set to take place on the 22nd, so that's 2 days from now, Thursday. In which they will make, I guess, that judge, as I talked about, that informal kind of quasi-legal or quasi-judicial hearing will take place in which the judge will make that decision. So by next week, we should know the at least immediate response to the preliminary injunction, as you mentioned. Presumably, that's going to come back not in favor of Microsoft Activision. And at that point, I think it goes to Brad Smith's quote as we look forward to making our argument in a federal court. Is like, hey, let us make our argument and we'll do that. So that's kind of where it looks like it's sitting right now. Is there's going to be, the regulators have been going back and forth. The regulators, their final day was today to respond to Microsoft's. Microsoft had an opportunity to submit information. Regulators had until today to respond back, and then a hearing takes place in 2 days. So we'll know definitely something in the next couple of days for sure. Oh, wait, excuse me.
Up to
a hearing take place on the 22nd with Microsoft prohibited from closing the acquisition until at least 5 days after a ruling is issued. So there's going to be a 5-day window there after the ruling, depending on what goes on. So that'll be interesting.
And isn't the only place that has locked it up this point was the CMA? The CMA and now the
only
FTC,
major
the
one.
two?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some little,
I don't know. Yeah,
government,
but that's
nobody
only
major.
Those are the only real ones that we have seen.
Yeah,
I don't personally. I'm sorry, UK, but I don't really take them seriously when it comes. I mean, have you looked at how the UK has been run in the last 10 years?
Yes.
Honestly, I mean, they're not even a real force in the world anymore. I mean, to be honest, they used to be a big major, but they're a small island. No offense to the people who live over in the UK now, but they're not really leaders in the world like they used to be. There's plenty of other places. The UK is just kind of doing its own thing all by themselves. I don't know. It's kind of frustrating that it's ending up going this way.
The UK audience goes mad. They throw their, they throw
I'm
their
not
team
trying to be
crumpets
offensive,
at Brian.
Have they been really influencing the direction of things in the world other than now trying to block an acquisition? I mean, have
No.
you heard of anything major that the UK's had a hand in the past 10 years? Other
Nope,
than,
I've seen
maybe mass migration like we've been doing?
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of people.
They're
I've seen
the
a bunch
leaders
of
when it comes to mass illegal immigration
yeah,
or
I've seen
legal migration.
seen a bunch of illegal immigrants killing people, stabbing them on the side of the streets for no good
Chopping
reason.
them with machetes in the
Yeah, it's about
streets.
the
I
only
mean,
good
you
thing
want
I've
to talk
seen.
about what they're excelling at? That's what they're excelling at. Obviously, not keeping on top of what technology is, because what they came back with as their excuse was totally stupid. They're saying that it's going to ruin an industry that hasn't even really taken off because there's nobody doing it right, and but you're saying they may do it right, and that'd be unfair. I mean, name me one major streaming service that's for video games that people are using in mass. Name one.
The only other thing is GeForce Now or G Cloud or whatever the hell it's called. That's the only other one.
But that's more like a local. That's not even. It's. I view that as kind of a different service.
No, GeForce Now is a cloud.
Yeah, but
still,
you kind
it's
of
very
install
small.
it in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very. For me, it's kind of a niche thing. It's not for the masses.
It's not,
and
no,
I haven't seen
correct.
it for the masses. And so this is what I'm saying. The first thing where, for the masses, something could come out that actually make that industry take off and start, just like streaming. It's like them sitting there and yelling about how unfair Netflix was to a Blockbuster. Sure, it was unfair. But guess what? It was better for the state of the industry. As far as now, you have the ability to get anything streamed right to your house for the most part in a moment's notice, versus driving down to a place and getting a piece of hardware that you're then walking back to your house and plugging into a system, and you have to rewind or else you're going to get a fine afterwards. I mean, them blocking and making these excuses is the same as them trying to sit there and defend the video rental places because Netflix would be unfair. It was unfair, but it was a much better technology, and it's where things needed to go to progress. And it's like they're trying to stop progress because they don't understand the technology. And so that's what frustrates me. These are the people in charge of our technology, the FTC, the CMA for the UK. They're supposed to be leaders in those industries. One thing I think you'll find with a lot of government workers, they are not leaders in the industries. The best people usually don't go work for the government. Sorry if somebody working for the government. I'm sure there are people that are good. I know your dad worked for government for a period of time, right?
Still does.
Or no, it still does. But when it comes to like tech, especially, they can get paid so much more outside of government for tech work that you're not going to get the top of the industry because they will not incentivize and pay you, right? And so now you've got a bunch of people that are not the top of their industry making decisions that are affecting the top of the industry. That's my problem with it. Is they need to, the biggest minds in the rooms need to be discussing this, and I don't feel like that's happening. I want to have it to where all the things have been discussed, and the opinion that's been made has a lot of logic, and it makes sense, and maybe it's a lot of foresight is happening. And if we talked about last week, the CMA did 4 weeks of studying for this out of the 20-something weeks that they had. Mm-hmm. They only bothered to look at streaming, gaming streaming for 4 weeks to make their decision. Really? I just that's frustrating to me, and hopefully I do want to see this merger go through because I think it'll be better for gaming, in my opinion. And it's just sad when you feel like, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. There's a lot of things that happen in life about this, government, politics, but this is just one of those situations where you just kind of sit back and it's like, what in the world is going on? Like, why these arguments that they're putting forward? The FTC. Give me a legitimate argument and say, here's why we're wanting to prevent it. Convince me, not them. Convince the people that are then going to be affected by it. And if you can convince me that that's dangerous with a logical argument, then I'll be like, hey, you're probably right. Maybe we shouldn't. But do you see anywhere here where they're really giving you a reason for this to be blocked? From like the FTC, I haven't seen any legitimate. I'm sure they're going to put it in the court filings. But come forward, say, hey, we're doing this because, and convince the public, because those are the ones that are going to be looking at you saying, what in the world are you thinking? And don't leave it up to the blog writers to inform the public of your opinions, right? They need to come up with these. So I don't know. We'll see here in a month what the answer is.
Well, we'll see here Yeah, we'll see her in 2 days.
I think overall, though, the deadline's in a month, though, for the whole thing, to where we'll know.
And that
is,
that creates its own problems within itself. So if they blow past this deadline because of, what are the, I don't know what I will admit, I'm not an expert on company mergers and acquisitions. I don't know what them blowing past that deadline. What does that mean? What impact or what ramifications does that have? I don't know. And I don't know that we'll know until we get there. Honestly, I really don't.
Because I looked at that filing that they did, had no information on why they're actually trying to block it.
The only thing I can find is they claim that the whole thing is being rushed. But that is not, to me, that is
there's
not
a deadline. What are you talking about? It's being rushed. They waited till the last minute to come up to say they're going to block it. The FTC is the ones not rushing. All the other countries have come up with a decision already.
The FTC's concern is that the Microsoft and Activision Blizzard may be rushed.
Which makes zero sense.
Well, no, and it really highlights a greater point of government has no semblance of time equals money, so they can case in point with all right, I'll bring this up and then we'll get banned and then we'll come back next week. But I mean, you had this investigation of the vice president's son for literally 6 or 7 years, this ongoing investigation, and it leads with some garbage plea deal that gets announced today. And that's just government at its finest, Brian. I mean, they can spin their wheels for a decade, and it's this
or the Mueller report. I mean,
it's just ridiculous.
What came out of the Mueller report? Years and years of investigation and nothing.
Well, and that's the thing is, so you take government, which is just used to stonewalling and delaying and just there's just no sense of urgency, seemingly ever. And then you have private business where it's like, literally time is money. I mean, that is a literal thing in business, and government just can't seem to understand that, which is fine, but you can't jump into that and go, well, this is being rushed. Well, you're not the rush committee. You're the Federal Trade Commission. What are you claiming? Antitrust? Like what's the issue? Monopoly? Like what is it? I haven't seen it made yet. Besides, it's happening too quickly, which, by the way, is a crock of shit because it's been a year and a half since this thing was announced. It's not like it just happened yesterday. We've been talking about it every week for a year, more than a year.
Well, and here's something that might be interesting is the CMA and the FTC met 26 times to discuss
this. Collusion?
Collusion. The two places that are now sitting here working to stop it met together 26 times. Why can't you come up with your decision on your own? Why are two separate governments discussing together how they're going to do this? That to me, CMA, UK, come up with your own decision for your own country. Don't rely on America to do it for you. FTC, why are you trying to influence? Because is the FTC really taking influence from the CMA? I don't think so. They already came up with their decision. It's like, why are you? What one is feeding the other to let's do this, and it's pretty sad because why should they be meeting at all or even having any discussion between these two countries about a decision that they're supposed to be making individually, their own opinion?
Because government just is out of control. That's my seriously. That's it.
There's no they can do. They feel like they can do whatever they want, and honestly, lately that's kind of proven to be true for the most part. I mean, look at the things that the government gets away with. And that's kind of the sad part of this. And this is just, I think, if they're able to block it, maybe it's just another example of that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we roll on out?
No, I think we are good to go.
All right.
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Cool. Well, if you want to find me at Boise Computer on Twitter or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, or Truth Social, you can check out my blog, biteoftech.com. Or if you want to go check out our website, infectionpodcast.com, just go to the upper right-hand side, join our server on Discord. It's a place that you can contact Nick and I directly, or maybe you want to put some links to some news that you've come across this week into the show news channel. Then we can review it for the live show. Also, we have the live shows on Twitch and YouTube. Afterwards, we upload it to Rumble, or you can go to the lower right-hand side, and there's all the different audio forms. Once we finish the show, we upload to those, and so whatever device platform is most convenient for you, just go and click one of those, and you can listen to the show. If you are going to be listening, though, you can go check out a particular episode show notes for that, and we have a video and audio player built into the page, and links for everything that we discussed throughout the show. So maybe you are listening, but you want to see a video, or maybe there's an image that we brought up on screen that you wanted to see. This is the perfect place to be able to do that, and it's all on our website. If you want to support us, you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support, or go to the support menu option up top.
And I'm proud to say, Brian, that the infectionpodcast.com website features no AI-generated content. So I do it. You and I do it every week.
Yeah. Not yet, anyways. We'll see.
Now, honestly, when they can do that, when we can just let the AI do this show, I'll be great. I just sit back here, pour myself a nice.
I'll have buttons. We'll just have buttons where we'll push. Be enraged.
Yeah.
Put go towards this. All you do is kind of form the way that the AI goes.
Crack open a couple cold ones. I mean, yeah. I mean, we'll
we're
be
the AI.
good to go.
We're the content moderators, kind of like what they're wanting to do for the blog writers.
Yes.
We just make sure the end result is what we wanted.
Absolutely, which is total outrage and lunacy. Brian, as always, greatly appreciated. Thank you, my friend. We'll catch up with you next week.
You.
As Brian mentioned, of course, our website, infectionpodcast.com. If you want to check me out, you can listen to my daily podcast. It's called Wilmington's Morning News. It's available on all your favorite podcast apps. You can also listen to it at nickcraig.com. If you missed any portion of the program, maybe want to check out some of our show notes, including the FTC's ridiculously weak argument against Activision Blizzard, well, you can do that at our website, infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.